Welcome, everybody. It's lovely to see people streaming in, and welcome to the information session on the arts for Churchill Fellowships 2024. So tonight, you're going to hear from some very exciting people. We have two guest speakers, Evan Marker and Peta Cavalaro, and they're going to share a little bit about their story, becoming Churchill Fellows and what that meant to them. But before I kick off, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I would like to also just let you know some housekeeping as well. We will have some Q&A opportunities right at the end, so please feel free to pop in and pop your questions in. So before we kick off, I would love to show you guys a quick 30-second clip, and it's on our YouTube channel, and it just gives you a little rundown of some of our makers and creators or people from the arts and trade sector. So we do have people from all over Australia. It's pretty exciting, everywhere, every state and territory. So welcome, everybody. It's really great to have you. So as you know, the Winston Churchill Trust is here to remember Sir Winston Churchill. So he resigned as the British Prime Minister in 1955, aged 80. And he'd served under 5 reigning monarchs, survived 3 wars. He'd been a writer, historian, journalist, adventurer, and painter. So that's particularly relevant to you guys. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1953. And on Churchill Memorial Sunday, on the 28th of Feb, 1965, a door-to-door appeal was launched in Australia. And at that time, it was one of the largest public fundraising efforts in Australian history. Around $4 million was raised at that time. And now that money has been held in a trust, and that's what the Winston Churchill Trust commemorates, Sir Winston Churchill. So if you have a passion for a subject that you want to navigate, you want to investigate overseas, and you want to make a difference in your industry within Australia, then a Churchill Fellowship can help you realize your aspirations. What are the attributes of a Churchill Fellow? So they're the types of people, and you're going to hear from 2 of them tonight, who are passionate and they're committed to an issue, and they want to learn world's best practice and share that knowledge back in Australia so that Australia can benefit. You do not need any academic qualifications. In fact, you don't even need to have finished school. This is not about it being academic. It is a unique and prestigious opportunity. It's open to all Australians from all walks of life. It is not just an overseas trip. It is the start of a lifelong journey. And it must be between 4 to 8 weeks taken in one continuous journey. So since 1965, the Winston Churchill Trust has sent more than 4,700 people overseas on fellowships, and typically more than 100 are awarded in Australia every year. So some of the eligibility requirements: you must be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident over the age of 18 years to apply. It does generally involve overseas travel, but we can provide support if you have a disability. And for people living in remote parts of Australia, we do allow domestic travel. If this is you, then please get in touch with us at our office. And also, you should keep in mind that we do support joint applications between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people on an issue that might be predominantly for Indigenous people. So basically, you've got to look overseas, and you're going to go overseas and you're going to find the best practice information or techniques or ways of doing things, and then you bring that back to Australia, because you will be able to say in your application that there's room for Australia to improve. Basically, you have to demonstrate in your application that you fully explored the topic within Australia. It's about pushing the boundaries. And it does not need to actually relate to your area of employment. We don't set the limits on the topics or issues, and that's the beauty of it. You pick your topic. It has also been referred to as a choose your own adventure. So if you can think of a topic, then you choose that. There are no limits. Tonight, we're going to hear from an opera singer as well as a stone letter carver, and it's immense, the different topics. So when you're framing your project, you ask yourself, how will I bring back benefits to Australia? So you apply online. We have, and I can see some hands raised, and that's really great. And we will get to your questions. I'm just going to minimize it at the moment, not ignoring it. And we will be doing questions and answers. So thank you so much for it. I'm just letting you know that you have to apply online from 1st of March is when applications open, and they close on the 1st of May. And then basically you can hop on in there. You've got a couple of months to be able to log in and out and do your application. As part of the application process, you have to do a little 60-second video pitch. You also need 2 references, so someone who can vouch for your personal characteristics and also someone who works in your field. So 2 references, very important. Don't leave it to the last minute because you need to get your references in before the deadline, and they have to do it through the system as well. On your itinerary, you should outline the destinations that will be of most benefit to your project. Don't try to do too much, leave space for some spontaneous meetings and experiences along the way. And in your application, you should list the most complete one that you can and a purpose. So for example, a meeting, an interview, an observation. Be specific about where you'd like to go. So you list, for example, the town, state, and country. So it might be Dallas, Texas, USA. It's important to have as much detail as you can. And this info is used by the trust here to cost your itinerary. And once it's approved, no additions can be made. The selection process. So the trust has panels and committees in every state and territory. So the applications, once you've put them in and it's closed, they are shortlisted. And then we take into account the referee comments to assess it. Then there are interviews held around the country to determine who should be recommended for a Churchill Fellowship. We prefer people to attend those in person, but speak to us if you cannot do that. And about half of those interviewed are likely to receive a fellowship. So making it to an interview is a significant achievement. And then the selection recommendations are reviewed by the board, finalised in September. And this year we'll also have an onboarding session. So that will be amazing for the successful applicants in Canberra in October. So the main thing is to, in your application, speak in plain language, avoid jargon, show the needs of what is compelling about your project, what are the benefits and how you're going to bring those back to Australia. Put down your itinerary and basically, how are you going to convince us that you're the right person to undertake this project? We want you to put an application in. We really want to see a lot of awesome arts people go for it. Make your application stand out, and tradespeople, and just do it. Our small team here in Canberra are excited to see applications rolling in from 1 March. So next up, I would love to introduce our first speaker, and that is Peta Cavalaro. So you can put your screen on, Peta. There she is. So Peta Cavalaro, I'll let her tell her story, but I'll just let you know she was awarded the Mr. and Mrs. Gerald Frank New Churchill Fellowship to pursue excellence in opera. and build international relationships with cultures in which opera thrives. So over to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And this is where I share my screen, isn't it? So I'm going to share my screen now.
And you've got a great story, Peter, so please tell us.
So yeah, let's get going. So I guess Rachel sort of introduced my project. I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm a girl who was born in a small town of less than 400 people in regional far north Queensland, and I was raised at home, primarily homeschooling. My mother was a primary school teacher, and so I had a really great introduction to music in that my family was musical, but I had very little formal training. So for someone like me from a very small area of regional Australia to be able to get to where I have today, and to be able to secure a Churchill Fellowship was just absolutely fantastic. So I'll tell you a bit about my fellowship. I was just so thrilled the whole 8 weeks. I took 8 weeks to travel to the USA, to Italy, to France, to Denmark, and to the UK. I met with artistic leaders in the field of opera to see how companies are evolving to survive today and then to thrive in the cultural landscape that we live in today, which is very different from the heyday of opera, which was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when it really was the thing. So yeah, it's a very difficult time for opera at the moment, but it's also a very exciting time. And I was particularly interested to see how companies were contributing to education, to build audiences from young children who love to come and see live acoustic music and theatre, because that's what's special about opera. I'll move to my next slide. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Easy peasy. So the other part of my fellowship, I had two strands. One was, as I've just spoken about, investigating the culture and investigating the companies, speaking with artistic leaders. And then the other one was, of course, I'm a professional opera singer, so I wanted to coach with conductors, with teachers, with the wonderful professional staff that you can access internationally. So for me, that meant, making contact with people that coach lyric diction. So I sing in Italian, German, French, and Russian language. And lyric diction means coaching the way that you sing those words and those languages rather than the way that you speak them. And then I also wanted to investigate further operatic performance practice, which means understanding how to perform repertoire from different periods in history, using different techniques of improvisation and style interpretation. And I wanted to develop my understanding of the histories of the stories that I was presenting, how they originated and how they came to be what we present today. I had a couple of really pinch me moments when I was overseas. Being able to visit big houses like the Metropolitan Opera in New York, Covent Garden in London, Operan in Denmark, and Teatro Comunale in Bologna in Italy. They were just absolute pinch me moments for a girl from the bush. I was able to observe my idol, Sondra Radvanovsky, who's a wonderful, wonderful soprano and someone who I look up to greatly. I was able to observe her rehearsals at the Metropolitan Opera when she was making her debut in the role of Medea, Cherubini's opera. And that was just absolutely astounding to be able to watch her at work, an invaluable opportunity. I also got to talk with the head of education and outreach at the Metropolitan Opera, and that's something that Churchill Fellowships help you with, is to open doorways so that you can speak to somebody like the head of education and outreach at one of the world's biggest opera houses. And that was a really fascinating opportunity because the Met is really working towards education as part of its marketing. So they put it under the budget of marketing, and education gets funded as a means of creating their audiences, which I think is just wonderful. And they have so many wonderful education programs that we could learn from in Australia. This is now Operan in Denmark that you're seeing. It's an incredible theatre where I was so fortunate to be able to coach with professionals. Here's a wonderful picture of me being able to coach with a wonderful woman in London, talking about Italian lyric diction there. And then we've got the Metropolitan Opera. Absolutely incredible pinch me moment to be there and speaking with people and staff there and watching the singers. And then over here is Denmark. So this is Operan. It's a round theatre. And then inside, it's a round glass ball, I should say, which you can see on the outside. And then inside that is the foyer. And then inside that is a beautiful wooden round theatre. It's just an absolutely inspiring building. And, you know, just awe-inspiring to be able to coach there as well with some of those amazing staff. I was just going to say, you know, something kind of unexpected that happened while I was overseas was to be able to meet with this incredible tenor, Anthony Roth Costanzo, who is actually a countertenor, super, super famous, super accomplished in the world of opera. And he actually sat down with me for an hour and shared a project that he has been working on. And I just got to share it with you because it's so inspiring. He was doing the title role, singing the title role in Philip Glass's opera Akhenaten, which is based on the real story of Akhenaten, the Egyptian pharaoh. He won a significant grant through the Mellon Foundation to be able to, I guess, publicise his work in the opera. So with this project and then with the collaboration of the Met, he took 10 and 11-year-old American school students who study ancient Egypt as part of their history curriculum, and he built on that by writing a curriculum based around the story of the pharaoh Akhenaten. He taught a little bit of the opera to the students. He engaged with singing and with the orchestra groups connected to the school. And then he basically brought together a bunch of artists to work with students in different mediums. So they did poetry, they engaged fashion schools to create fashion shows based on the opera and the idea of Akhenaten. And at all of these events, they were handing out family discount flyers. They engaged with the Library of New York City, the Brooklyn People's Ball, and created basically a sellout season of the opera when it came to New York. And it was so inspiring because I think that's the kind of singer that I want to be, and being able to see somebody who's out there on the rock face doing it like that was just so inspiring. Now, going on, here's the inside of the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden. I was so thrilled to be able to coach there with some of the amazing conductors. I guess when I was doing more investigations into the cultural landscape and the way that opera is progressing in these countries, I was really surprised. These are the countries that have a really rich performance history of amazing opera singers and opera spectacle, and some of the most legendary houses in the world. And I think in Australia, we have a little bit of a sense in the opera world that we have to be careful and do our best to put on opera just as good as they do in Europe and America. And we're very careful to do it properly. But what I was really surprised to learn is that opera, even in these amazing centres with so much history and so much reverence for the art form, opera's not really thriving, but it's more surviving. So to see what these companies are doing to help opera survive and then to move into a new age with opera, they're really experimenting, they're really innovative, and they're really ripping up the stereotype and trying to find the essence of what is important about opera and what makes opera special and how can it be relevant and wonderful for audiences today. So I guess, I wasn't really expecting to find that in the extremes that I did, but it's really experimental and it's really exciting. A big thing overseas is that every company is helping with education, and every company is subsidizing tickets for under 40-year-olds. It's just a case of surviving while we reinvent ourselves. So since returning to Australia, I have been able to successfully win my very first contract to perform a leading role in an opera with the State Opera of South Australia. And you can see me on the screen performing the role of the Countess in Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. And I was so fortunate in this production to work with a conductor from Sweden, Tobias Ringborg, and with the Adelaide Symphony Orchestra. I received critical acclaim for my presentation, hard to do, and I have subsequently gone on to perform a leading role with Opera Australia in their production of La Traviata. Additionally, being a Churchill Fellow has given me the opportunity to continue to develop my initiatives to provide music education access to young people in regional and remote Australia. And, I think that it's really important that we include everybody in this conversation of music and of opera. And I think living in a regional area, coming from there myself, it shouldn't disadvantage you, because I think the more diversity we see in the arts and particularly in opera, the more successful we're going to be into the future. Being a Churchill Fellow required a huge amount of time and concentration, but because I chose a field that I was really passionate about, it really tied into my everyday existence. And it really, I guess, enriched what I'm able to do in my own career and the way that I give back to my communities. In preparing for my application, I made contact with another Churchill Fellow through the arts, and we met and we talked about what was going to be important to highlight in my application. And that really helped me just to sit down and have a coffee with a Churchill Fellow. And you'll find that Churchill Fellows are really open and excited to help you with your application process. So that's a really good thing to do. I love the sentiment behind the Churchill Trust. These fellowships are meant to forward all of mankind, which is wonderful. Not just one person, not just their project, but really to provide an opportunity for passionate people to create global networks, and in order to enrich the community in which they live, which ultimately is going to lead to a more connected and innovative society the world over, which is just wonderful. They have this motto that I love: learn globally, inspire locally. So it's the inspire locally part that I think is really important to include in your application. The Churchill Trust should support you as an innovative, passionate, evolving person who's going to continue to be an asset to your community and to the world as you grow and change over your lifetime. You'll find that the planning process of the Churchill Fellowship requires you to be really organised, especially setting up meetings and doing, travel schedules and things like that, although they do help you a bit with that. But you're basically your own PA and you'll wish that you had one. But if you can get through that part of the fellowship, it sets you up really well to disseminate your report when you get back home and to build and to share on all that you learned. And, being a Churchill Fellow means that you're always a Churchill Fellow and you're part of a community of really like-minded Australians, no matter what topic their fellowship was on. So that's a really wonderful part of being a Churchill Fellow. You're always part of a community, and these people are wonderful because they really want to make a difference in Australia.
Thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. And thanks, guys, for your chats and your questions along the way. So I'll just throw one from Emily Leckie. She said, Peter mentioned that the fellowship opened doors for conversation. how much of the itinerary should be confirmed by host organizations versus how much can we leave room to try to get those confirmed should an application be successful? So, I mean, we can provide some guidance, but what was your experience there?
Well, yeah, Rachel, my experience was, it's a great question because you do stress about this stuff before you go, but I had my skeleton outlined. So those people who wrote references for me and those particular people that I kind of based my itinerary around, they were confirmed. Although in the arts, people are notoriously, like, our schedules are all over the place. So they moved and changed and I had to be super flexible. But I just had the outline, and then I had like a whole list of contacts for each of those places. And as I went and had meetings with people, they suggested other people or introduced me to other people. So the schedule was super movable and changeable, but I had at least 2 meetings set up in every country that were my rock.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much. We're going to bring you back at the end for some more question and answers. But next up, thank you very much. We will now introduce our next guest speaker. So he is an artisan and an artist in his own right, Mr. Evan Marker. If you could switch on your camera, Evan.
Yes, have you
There
got
he
me?
is. So Evan's from South Australia, and he was awarded the Bob and June Prickett Churchill Fellowship to train in the art of stone letter carving and observe the operation of a commercial studio. And he's got brilliant story, gorgeous images to show you as well. So I'll throw it to you, Evan, and don't forget to share your screen before you turn your PowerPoint on.
Okay, well, let's see how we go.
Thanks so much.
PowerPoint. Okay, so yeah, my name's, I'll just get started. My name's Evan Marker. I'm a stonemason in Adelaide. I was awarded my fellowship in 2019 and I travelled in 2022. There was a delay because of COVID. The purpose of my trip was to research and get some training in the art of stone letter carving, which is carving stone inscriptions in stone by hand. I'd received a request from a client here in Adelaide to do a carven inscription. And when I went to research to find out exactly how I'm going to approach that and how I'm going to do it, I realised that there really was no alternative available in Australia to the mechanically produced inscriptions, which are generally done with a stencil and a sandblasted into the stone face. So I was researching it online and I found that the UK, there was places around the world where it was practiced, but the UK was a bit of a hotspot where there was a long tradition of hand-carved stone inscriptions and a flourishing industry happening there currently. So I based my travel around visiting the UK and catching up with people there. Here we go. Yeah. So can you see those photos there okay? I'll just say that a lot of the photos here are not actually carvings that I've done there by the professionals that I met overseas. So I travelled to London, where I partook in a 5-day introductory workshop there at the City and Guilds of London School of Arts. From there, I caught the train to Edinburgh, where I came across a carver online here and organised it with him, and I did 3 days private tuition with him. From Edinburgh, I went into the central part of Wales, in the northern part of Wales. The nearest township was Llansillen, but the actual work, it was a 5-day workshop that I did there, and that was held on in a rural area on a farm where they were sort of supplementing their farm income with by hosting events on the property. So yeah, we stayed there for 5 days, and it was a wonderful time there. I then travelled down south to the Salisbury Cathedral, where I met the head stonemason there, and he took me through the stonemason's workshop and took me around the cathedral. that was a beautiful time to see stonemasonry at its finest being practiced. There was wonderful. I then went to Cambridge and visited some studios there, and met with a few carvers who were quite well known. Cambridge is another little bit of a hotspot for the craft over in the United Kingdom. Met quite a few practitioners there, get trained there, and produce a fair bit of their work there. So like the journey itself, there was highlights every day. It was a joy from start to finish. I absolutely loved it. The ones that come to mind for me to talk about was visiting the Kindersley Cardoza workshop in Cambridge. David Kindersley established his workshop there in the 1940s, and he approached it as a bit of a kickback to the increasing mechanisation and industrialisation of the craft. At that time, he felt strongly that the hand-carved, hand-produced stone inscriptions were vastly superior to what was able to be produced by mechanical means, and that was the basis that he established the workshop. So it's still operating today in the same spot. They strictly stick to traditional techniques. Just about everything there is done by hand. No machinery or power tools at all. It's got this old worldly sort of feel about it, but they produce like these very high grade contemporary carvings, and they have an enormous. The people who run it is still run by the family. His partner Lida Lopez Cardoza, she still runs it, and she's preparing to pass it on to her son and his partner currently. And they have an immense respect for the craft, and also an immense respect for the people who are carving there. So it was a really beautiful space to spend some time and get shown around. The second highlight that I'll talk about is visiting the Salisbury Cathedral. Such a rare and beautiful experience to get shown through the stonemason's workshop there. Being a stonemason who's been trained locally here, I've always felt that cathedral stonemasonry, which doesn't exist here because we don't really have a cathedral here, but that's sort of the pinnacle of the pinnacle of the craft, and to be able to visit there, see the level that they're working at there, the way their workshops are set up. The photo on my slide there is one from the workshop with all the tools and a piece of stone they're working on. The other photo is actually from the Kindersley Cardoza workshop. There's some carving that's being done there. So, and it was amazing to see the letter carving being incorporated into the operation of the stonemasons workshop, where it's part of where it's sort of rather than being standalone, it's just one of a set of skills that all stonemasons sort of receive in their training over there. The other highlight was going to Nant-Hurwyn. I've already spoken a little bit about the workshop we did there. It was absolutely beautiful in this rural part of Wales. Stayed in these beautiful old stone buildings, and basically were immersed in the craft from waking up in the morning to when we went to bed at night. There was about a dozen people who travelled there from all over Europe. Some were artists, some graphic designers, other people just interested in the craft. And we were hosted there by the family that owned the farm. They were absolutely beautiful. They fed us, they sung to us, they told us stories, and it was a magic time. Another moment I had that has stuck with me was meeting Richard Kindersley in London. Now, Richard is David Kindersley's son. He trained in David's workshop in Cambridge, and then moved to London shortly after that and established his own workshop in London, and became one of the foremost producers of stone inscriptions over there. producing many like memorials and things for governments and private institutions. And I had tried to contact him several times from Australia. I sort of read about him online, but I didn't have any luck. And on my last morning in London, after the workshop had finished, I had his phone number, and I was leaving the next day, and I just on spec, I decided to call him and see if I could get hold of him. And I got him, and I spoke to him on the phone, and he lived nearby to where I was actually, which was wonderful, and invited me around. And I spent the afternoon with him in his workshop, with him just talking to me about his theory, his philosophies about the craft, and how he operates his workshop there. And he actually invited me back when I came back to London in a couple of weeks later to spend some time with him in his studio, and we practiced. He guided me practicing drawing letters. Actually, the design and drawing of letters is a very big part of the craft. So yeah, it was a beautiful thing. And I remember that something that really struck me and has stuck with me, and that I didn't really expect, was like all of the professional craftspeople, the carvers that I managed to meet over there and spend some time with. They were so generous and enthusiastic and warm and friendly, and it was beautiful to meet them all. It was a wonderful thing. And one last highlight is I got to see Pearl Jam at Hyde Park with 65,000 other adoring fans. So coming back to Australia, I run my own business here as a stonemason. So the challenge was to put enough time into practice carving to get to some sort of decent level of proficiency. Over in the UK, the professional letter carvers will do a 3-year apprenticeship before they are thought of as reaching a level to produce sort of commercial grade carvings. So I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now, and I'm absolutely nowhere near that. But you keep doing the photo on this slide is a piece that I did and entered in the Brighton Jetty sculpture event a couple of years ago. So just keep carving as much as I can and keep practicing. I've had a couple of commissions, small commissions that I've done, which have been received really well. I've done some assistant training for the stonemasons in the letter carving unit at where the apprenticeship in Adelaide is held. Done some demonstrations at different events, and I've just recently received some funding to run my own workshop, a 4-day workshop, which is going to be happening here in Adelaide in April, where we're aiming to sort of raise the awareness of the craft here and get some people hands-on learning about it, and hopefully we can get a bit of momentum and get some ongoing workshops happening. So it was mentioned to mention a bit about being a fellow. Well, I love being a fellow. It's great. The things that stand out to me is the recognition you get from the trust about your own achievements. What you are doing is you're doing it with your own energy and motivation, and the people from the trust make it clear that they respect, recognise and support all of your efforts. So they make it feel as though that you might feel as though you're getting a lot from the trust to be able to do your journey, but also the trust is getting a lot from what you're doing as well. And they make that clear. The connection between the fellows, obviously there's a lot of camaraderie as you go to events and see things online, and the longer you are a fellow, the more people you get to recognise, and then you talk to people when you see them. So you're meeting these people who are doing these wonderful things that you would never have ordinarily met otherwise. And the other thing I love about being a fellow is that I've got a great story to tell, and I tell it as much as I can. I love telling my fellowship story about my journey. The trust will always encourage you to tell people about it, to spread the word, encourage other people to have a go. And yeah, and that you will, if if you get awarded this fellowship and you do a journey, you will have a great story to tell. There's no doubt about that. Again, these pictures here are not mine. I wish I could carve like that, but these are done by professionals in the UK. So my experience of applying, I made sure that I read all the recommendations really closely, and I stuck as close as I could to what the recommendations asked for, the word tally for the answers, the type of answers, and I really tried to understand what they wanted to hear from me, and tried to include that in my application. I wrote and wrote and rewrote and write and writ and rewrote again my pitch. I was having new ideas all the time, which I had to go back and incorporate into what I was doing. I spoke a lot to people whose opinion I really trusted, just to make sure that everything was still making sense. And the other thing that I realized that I had to do was sometimes you just got to let go of things that you might love to have as part of your journey, as part of your fellowship, but aren't just quite fitting. You need to be prepared to let go of them. So we're coming to the end now, I think. Yeah, so the last sort of message that I think for me is important is that there's a lot of prestige associated with a fellowship, and some people just do some incredible things, and sometimes you look at it and you go, wow, I can't even imagine some of the things that the motivation and what gets people up and able to do some of the things. But you just got to know that all the time that the board, the trust, they know what they're doing. The decision they've made to award you a fellowship is not taken lightly, and you absolutely deserve it. And yeah, fantastic for you if you're successful. Just go for it and do it. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much, Evan. And if you could hear the round of applause, everybody I'm sure is very appreciative of you sharing your story. And Peter, could you put your camera back on, because we're just going to open it to some questions and answers. And thanks for everyone for writing up your questions. I would also like to introduce our acting CEO, Sally Campbell. So she's making a guest appearance.
Hello, everyone.
We've answered quite a few questions in here. But firstly, let's talk about Emma's question. She said, could you please provide an example of what an itinerary might look like? For example, how many commitments should we have per week and how much travel, downtime? I realize this is a case-by-case basis, but Peter, could you just start by telling us a little bit about how you organised your itinerary and what it looked like? And then we might throw to Sally for the official line on itineraries.
Yeah. So in terms of, I know where she's coming from. It is confronting to have to nail down an itinerary, but like I said, I reckon I had about one meeting per week absolutely locked in before the fellowship started, with singing. And I think it's like this really with any form of artistry. As you go, you develop and you take on skills and you grow. So allowing time for integration of skills and for allowing for things to settle so that you actually learn and take in on your fellowship journey is really important. So I always had a few days of rest when I got to a new country. Time to just slowly get rid of my jet lag, get my voice back, maybe go and see something nice in the city that I was in. And then I would go into meetings. And then you got to be aware as well, you could get COVID while you're over there, and that could put a big dent in what you're able to do, because you just can't, you've got to stop. But yeah, I think rest days are really important. You've got to collate your report as you're going. You don't want to be leaving that till the end, because that is way too much work. Yeah, so I think, yeah, a few days of rest after a travel, and then a few day, a day here and a day there to get recuperate and to allow skills to settle was really beneficial for me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And Sally, could you just let us know about what the attorney needs to look like in the actual form, and perhaps then tell us about the funding side of the fellowship as well, and how that's awarded?
Sure. So your fellowship travel is from 4 to 8 weeks. You're welcome to extend it at your own expense. We will still fly you home. As Peter said, we ask you not to overcommit. Don't push yourself too hard. It can be 30 hours of travelling time just to get to your first destination. So allow a day or two off per week. Try and get some meetings organised, but make sure you leave some gaps. Someone will want to take you out to dinner or suggest another meeting or do some other things. It's up to you to fill that itinerary, but just don't overcrowd it. You want to get the most out of it without exhausting yourself. And the funding side of things, Rachel, can I just pick up to that question? Yeah.
That one.
Could you share a little bit about the funding side of the fellowship, in that how big a project costs to what is a reasonable figure awarded? So the average fellowship in 2023 was 35,000. It had jumped up in the last couple of years with inflation and exchange rates. Essentially, the cost is based on where you are travelling to. So you need to put in your itinerary the city you're going to and the state and the country, and we will allocate the funding for that place. So, and it depends a bit on the time you go for, of course. An 8-week fellowship will allow you more money, obviously, than a 4-week fellowship. So it's really about your travel itinerary.
Thank you, Sally. We've actually had so many questions, and one of the questions was, will the questions be available? I believe they are available on the recording, but if not, we'll make sure that they are. Somebody said, wonderful carving, Evan. Somebody's asked, can I apply as an artisan to professionally develop and study best practice for a related organisation I run in the same field? I believe the answer is yes.
Absolutely, you can.
Evan, did you want to make a comment on that one?
Sorry, what was that one? I didn't quite.
So the question is, can I apply as an artisan to professionally develop and study best practice for a related organisation I run in the same field?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I did, really. So, and the letter carving is part of a stonemason's skill set, and I run a stonemasonry company here in Adelaide. So that was the reason why I wanted to do it, and it was a perfect fit. And I really felt that having the stonemasonry background helped me so much when I was over there, because I could relate so well to the people that I was meeting and talk about what they're doing and what I was able to. So I was able to offer them things as well as them offering me things. So yes, I would say definitely.
Thank you. We have an excellent question about accommodations can be made for those with a disability to travel in Australia, but is there support for those of us with disability or medical conditions to undertake the fellowship overseas as well? Or would we face a barrier for international travel? Sally, could you talk to us about that, please?
Sure. So if you have a disability, please let us know. I think there's a place on the application form. We have had people with a disability. Donna Purcell, she travelled overseas. She's blind. We have a lady who is deaf going this year. What we will do, if necessary, is you can take a carer with you, and we will provide you for support for that carer, to travel with you. So don't let that be a barrier. Put in an application and we'll try and get you there.
Thank you. And we have Michelle Bates has said, such generous presenters. Thank you, fellows. That's nice. Just a little tidbit for Peter from Laura Wilson. I'm friends with Australian countertenor David Hanson. Small world. Do you know him?
Not personally, but
okay.
Good for you.
They said, thank you so much for your wonderful sharing. I look forward to completing my application. Yeah, some of the people, this is a question for both of you. I'm going to throw it to you, Peta. Some of the people I'd like to meet with are extremely busy, high profile. How do you get their commitment when you don't know if you're going to be successful?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one. I had a lot of high profile coaches to work with, and you know, even the people running different programs at these top houses, they don't have time. They have 5 minutes to see you, you know. But I think those meetings are really important, because those are the people who are out in the world doing things, making things happen. And those are the people who are going to connect you with other people while you're over there as well. I did have this kind of, I guess, theory, or it seemed to work, where I would just ask for 5 minutes. And if it was a coaching, well, that was a bit different because you need a full session. But if it was just a contact, I would just ask for 5 minutes, and then that's what they can give. And then invariably after the meeting, it would lead to, oh, let's go and have a coffee. I've got half an hour on this day, or whatever. It is important to get those locked down before you go, because it's really disappointing to kind of not have that locked in and then to go over and for it not to happen. You need to have some of those locked in. And it's really helpful sometimes if you have 1 or 2 people that you can do this with, to ask them to be your references, because then they become invested in your project as well, and they want to see you succeed. And then when you get over there, they've got more time for you. So they're 2 strategies I would use.
Thank you so much, Peta. One of the questions here are bullet point responses appropriate in the application form?
Yes, they are. I think when you see the application form, it's really, the space to answer your question is really not very long. I think you'll find it very straightforward. You can use bullet points if you want to. Just keep it clear and succinct.
In very plain language.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rachel, I even used abbreviations in mine, the ones that were obvious and worked.
Yeah. How about you, Evan? Did you go for plain language and bullet points?
Yeah, definitely. But as you find, I found that the reason why I had to revise and rewrite so much is because I was always going over the suggested limit. So I'd always have to cut it back to just the most important. I just had to say, you know, I could understand what you guys wanted to hear, and you just had to say that and no more. So yeah, I had to keep it very clear and succinct.
Yeah, thank you. So the answer to Scotia Monkovic about keeping a low carbon footprint is that our organisation is deeply committed to doing that. So yes, if you choose the low carbon footprint options, then we will cover the travel costs.
We will, although depending on where you are going to, you would probably initially need to take a flight. But certainly we encourage people to use public transport for land travel.
Yeah. This one here, the criteria says the project must benefit the Australian community. Peta, I'd like to throw to you. Can you please speak a little about what and who your communities were and what kind of impact do fellows need to make? I think yours is a really good example of that.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold. So first of all, we have the opera community, so the classical music community, and I like to not make a divide and just call it the music community in Australia. I think since COVID, it's become a really tricky time for us, and we are having to reinvent ourselves as an industry. Live performance is becoming, I guess, less popular because we have so many digital options available to us, but we have to remember what's special about that. And the second kind of part of that community is the young people. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face today is that music is not a big part of our curriculum anymore. In fact, in some schools, it's not actually part of the curriculum. So integrating music and appreciation for music and love and enjoyment and this knowledge that you need into young people's lives, it's a big challenge for us today. And there's lots of research to show how wonderful it is for young people's brains to experience music and how it actually improves many, many other aspects of life and studies. And did that answer the question? Because I kind of got lost there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I think you really reached out to like regional communities.
Yeah, and I mean that's very true. There's a big gap between, if you live in the city, it's very easy to access music education. Often families have higher incomes and can afford to do that kind of education on their own. So I think providing that education as part of our public system is really important, and then finding ways that we can do it so that just because you live in Catherine and it's like 6 hours drive to get to a music lesson doesn't mean that you should have to miss out on having music in your life. And what are the ways that we can provide access for kids in those areas, especially when they're low socioeconomic areas as well, and music is seen as a luxury. And I just think it needs to be much more part of our everyday life, and giving people access to that is really important.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. We have quite a few questions coming in about if you've got kids. So the questions are around, if I've got a small child, I don't want to leave them for 8 weeks, can we bring them? Can we bring our child and partner? Or if we're a carer, are we committed to take that person with us? So I'm going to throw to Sally for these questions. It's so lovely to have Sally here. She's the brains of the trust right now. So yeah, could you talk to us a little bit, Sally, about that?
Sure. So fellowship is awarded to you, and because of your presentation and your application. So you are welcome to take your partner and your children with you. We provide an accommodation allowance, and it's really up to you to decide how you spend that. You can go camping or you can stay at the Hilton. You'll get the same amount of money. Some people do take family. Some people find it wonderful and really supportive. Other people really enjoy travelling on their own. So it's really up to you. It's part of the beauty of the fellowship. We also have dependence allowance if you leave your partner and children behind, but they need financial assistance. We will pay an allowance to assist them while you're away.
Great. Well, I think we're pretty much wrapped up to the end of this hour. We do have quite a few other questions come in, but I recommend that people just head over to our website, because we've got heaps of information on there under frequently asked questions. If your question isn't there, please reach out to our office. We would love to hear from you. And we've had so many people writing in just saying they love you too, Evan and Peter. So you guys might get some fan mail coming in through our website as well. Carmen says, I love opera, but I do not like that Australians do not know how to dress up for it. Sad face. Oh man, there's so many good questions. Evan, there was one for you just quickly about how did you bring information back to Australia?
I kept a journal of my trip. So yeah, I came back with books full of notes and a journal of every day. I wrote down what I'd done and the things that I'd learned and thoughts that I'd had. And I took 2 weeks. I took an extra 2 weeks off when I got back to write my report, so that I was still in the zone and it was all fresh and clean. And I probably wrote the 90% of the report during those 2 weeks. So it was important to me not to leave it, and I felt that really helped the quality of the report in the end as well.
Yeah, no, that's good to know.
I had like 1,400 photos on my camera.
Oh wow, that's so cool. All righty, guys. Well, we're going to wrap it up. It's been fantastic, so inspiring, insightful, beautiful sharings. So really useful, enjoyable. That's what everyone said. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Everyone. Good night.
Have a good evening.